Lily Rose Depp reveals why cult movie starring dad Johnny Depp left her traumatized. A childhood in the shadows of a legend. For most children, movies are an escape, bright, colorful fantasies that transport them into magical worlds filled with adventure and wonder. But for Lily Rose Depp, growing up in Hollywood was a different experience. While other kids saw actors as distant figures on screens, she saw them in her living room, at her birthday parties, on family vacations. She grew up surrounded by cameras, flashing lights, and conversations about scripts and film sets. Her father, Johnny Depp, wasn't just an actor. He was a chameleon, a master of transformation who disappeared into his character so completely that sometimes even she struggled to recognize him. She had seen him as Captain Jack Sparrow, with his wild dreadlocks and slurred speech. She had seen him as Willy Wonka, with his purple coat and peculiar voice. She had seen him as the Mad Hatter, with his painted face and bizarre mannerisms. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for Edward Scissorhands. Because this time, it didn't feel like just another role. This time, it felt real. And it was terrifying. The first time Lily Rose watched Edward Scissorhands. As a child, Lily Rose had always been aware of Edward Scissorhands. People constantly told her it was one of her father's greatest performances. She would see posters of Edward, his pale face, darkened eyes, and tangled hair, and feel a strange unease creeping up her spine. Fans would tell stories of how the movie made them cry, how it touched their hearts in ways they never expected. She didn't understand why. One day her curiosity got the best of her. She was still very young, too young perhaps to fully grasp the depth of the story, but she wanted to see what everyone was talking about. She settled in, thinking it would be another magical fairy tale, another fun adventure. Then Edward appeared on the screen, and her entire world changed. Seeing her father as a stranger. The moment Edward appeared, Lily Rose felt something she had never felt before. Fear, not because the character was meant to be scary. Edward wasn't a monster, but there was something deeply unsettling about seeing her father's face, yet not seeing him at all. Edward's skin was pale, almost ghostly white. His dark eyes were hollow, sunken, filled with an unbearable sadness. His wild hair looked unkempt, as if he had never known a gentle touch. And worst of all, his hands, cold metallic scissors, clicking and clanking as he moved. Blades where fingers should have been. It wasn't makeup. It wasn't a costume. It wasn't an act. To Lily Rose, this wasn't just a character. This was her father, transformed into something unnatural. She sat frozen, unable to look away. Her tiny hands gripped the edge of the couch, her heart pounding. And then, the story began. The scene that changed everything. At first, Lily Rose tried to convince herself that it was just a movie, but as the film went on, something inside her broke. She watched as Edward, despite his innocence and kindness, was ridiculed, judged, and feared. She saw him being welcomed into a new world, only to be betrayed and abandoned. And then came the final act, the scene that haunted her for years. Edward, accused of crimes he didn't commit, is hunted down by an angry mob. He flees back to his dark, crumbling mansion where he was first created. He doesn't fight back. He doesn't argue. He doesn't try to explain himself. He just accepts his fate. He disappears into the shadows, forever separated from the girl he loved, forever alone. As the movie ended, Lily Rose burst into tears. Her small frame trembled as she sobbed into her hands. She didn't understand why, but it hurt. It hurt to see her father so helpless, so lost, so heartbroken. It hurt to see people turn against him, even though he had done nothing wrong. And worst of all, it hurt to know that she could do nothing to save him. She turned to her mother, her voice shaky. Why did they leave him all alone? But there was no answer that could make it better. The nightmares that followed. That night, Lily Rose couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, haunted by Edward's face. She imagined him standing in the darkness of her room, his scissor hands glinting in the moonlight. She imagined the sound of metal scraping against itself, the quiet, lonely breathing of someone who had been forgotten. Every time she looked at her father, she saw Edward. It didn't matter if he was smiling, laughing, playing with her. The image was burned into her mind. For weeks, she felt uneasy around him. She didn't mean to. She loved her father more than anything. But something had changed, and Johnny Depp noticed. Johnny's heartfelt explanation. One evening, as Johnny was tucking her into bed, he noticed the way she hesitated before hugging him. His heart ached. He sat beside her, brushing her hair back gently. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" And then, she told him everything. Through quiet sobs, she told him how much the movie had scared her, how she couldn't stop seeing Edward when she looked at him, how she never wanted him to be alone like that. Her words shattered him. He had never meant for her to see him that way. He had never thought that a role, just a role, would affect his daughter so deeply. But instead of brushing off her fears, he took her tiny hands in his, and he explained. He told her that movies were powerful because they made people feel things, that just because Edward was sad, it didn't mean he was sad. That acting was about telling stories, stories that could change people's hearts. And most importantly, he told her, no matter what I look like on screen, no matter what character I play, I'm always your dad. Lily Rose sniffled, looking up at him. For the first time, she understood. Growing up and looking back, years passed. Lily Rose grew older, wiser. She became an actress herself, stepping into the same industry that had shaped her childhood. And one day she decided to watch Edward Scissorhands again. This time she saw it differently. She saw the beauty in Edward's loneliness. She saw the artistry in her father's performance. She saw why the film meant so much to people. And she realized the reason it had traumatized her as a child was because it was so real. Because deep down, she had always seen a part of her father in Edward. Final thoughts. Now as an actress, she understands the power of cinema. She understands why people cry when they watch Edward Scissorhands. Because some stories don't just entertain us, they stay with us. And sometimes, they change us forever.